Okay, so I've got my scene obviously set up more for rendering, and we've already looked at most of the rendering settings in previous demos. But I just want to cover off and go over all of those render settings that you have in Revit. And so you get those, of course, when you click on the teapot down on the view control bar and get your rendering dialog box there. You can also go to the View tab and then click Render, and does the same thing. But very quickly, I just want to put in a decal, really so I've got something more interesting to look at, because I'm sick of looking at these plain surfaces without anything good to look at. So, and again, that'd be a good reminder about decals as well if you haven't used them for a little while. So on the Insert tab, then you just need to click Place Decal. And if it's the first time, it'll come up like this, where you need to click the Create New Decal button, and I'll maybe just call it Poster. That's what it's going to be. And then click the Browse button and find the image that you want. And there is a logic to what I'm doing. The reason I'm doing this at the same time as looking at rendering is because this is all related to your render paths. So the file that I'm choosing, you can see here, I'm just going to choose from this paintings folder here. I've got some of my favourite paintings there, and I'll choose, who am I going to do today? Candies, there we go. And so clicking OK, you can see the file's obviously there, so I'll click OK, and then normally it comes up better than this. You can see it's not really showing me how that's going to look, so I'm just going to try and click on the wall, and it has worked. I've noticed with 2019 that decals are a little bit buggy. They weren't this bad before, but I've seen a few issues. So if you see it come up like that, where you can't see it at first, don't worry, it will work in the end. But again, it's just a 2019 thing. I think it's got some problems. Also, when you go to stretch it, I've noticed a few issues when people do that. So it's probably not you if you notice that you can't stretch just by dragging on the corners there like I am now. If you notice that happening, I saw a few people have that problem, you can always try to type in the height and the width on the options bar there to change the size instead. So I'll make it 1500, and you can see it'll change with any luck. There we are. If you want to change it so the width and the height are different, you can turn off lock proportions, and then you can stretch it to change the proportions. But I don't want to ruin Kandinsky's artwork by doing that, so I'll leave it as it is. And there we are, so I'm happy with that poster. And now I'm just going to go back into it on the Insert tab and then Place Decal again, just to show you how it comes up the second time. So the first time it comes up with the option to set up your first decal, but now that I've done one, you can see in Properties it's come up with that one that I've already chosen. So I have to go to Edit Type to make a new one. And then I can click Duplicate, and I want to do a rug on the floor, so I'm going to call it Rug. It'll be Rug 1, because I might have a couple. And then you can just click Edit, and we're back to the same settings I had before. And I can click that Browse button again to choose a different image. So I'm just going to go and find my rugs folder. I've got a few different rugs in there. Yeah, that'll do. And that's it, so I'll click OK, and OK, and now again, should be coming up with a nice rectangle to show us where this is going to go, but it's not working, so I'm going to click and hope that it comes in. There it is. I'll cancel now and come back to select it, and I can drag it, stretch it, and you can rotate and do other things like that in a perspective view now in Revit, which is a nice thing, but sometimes that is still easier back in a plan view. So I can see here there's my rugging plan, and if I click rotate, I think that's easier to rotate it around 90 degrees there. And maybe while I'm at it, I can go and change it to realistic and see how that looks with the texture. And I'll click and drag to stretch it. And this one, I want to change the proportions, so I'll turn lock proportions off, and then I can stretch it unevenly. So coming back then to my perspective view, you can see that, and you can still keep adjusting it. Maybe it's a little bit, not too bad actually. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So if you're fussy like me and a lot of other people and have noticed the white border around the edge, you can take that off. Maybe I'll show you very quickly, but for this assignment you don't really need to get into that level of detail. It's meant to be concept presentation, so don't get too obsessive about things like that. But if you want to know, you can just again go back into the decal settings by clicking Edit Type, and again Edit, and you'll see there's an option for cutouts. And so there, if I go to Image File, I'm pretty sure with this one I do have a cutout file. Oh, that's my antique rug, sorry, it's not that one I've got. Okay, so the antique rug file there, I don't have a cutout for it. These other ones you can see that are black and white, they're the cutout files. So what I'll do is on the fly just make one because it's quite easy. If you open it in Photoshop, it will give you, I think, a much better idea about how textures work with rendering. With the transparency, yeah, unfortunately not, no. 3ds Max will let you, but Revit, it's only for decals, they don't, the transparencies don't come through. Oh yeah, if you wanted to make it a rectangle, absolutely, that's fine. It's only if you've got an uneven, like a wavy edge, that you have to do this extra step, yeah. But like Rebecca was saying, transparencies should do the job with most programs, it's just Revit. You probably can get it to work, but in decals it seems a bit harder. So, okay, so I'm going to just use the magic wand and try and pick my white, and maybe I'll even duplicate the layer because that's locked, but I don't think that's the reason. Oh yes, there we are. Okay, so I've got my white, and then I want to have a black area where I've got the bit that's currently white, so I'm just going to go to Edit and Fill, and make sure it's got black there for the contents, click OK, and then I'll go to Select Inverse, and then again Edit, Fill, and white. So I've got a black and white image with the solid part, the part that I want to see, is white. So I'm going to save as, now as a JPEG. Even a PNG would work, but, well, I'll do a PNG actually for the sake of it. And I'm going to call this Cutout. Okay, so now back into Revit. Where is it? Okay, so there's my new file. So I'm choosing that for the cutout, and that's it. Click OK, OK, and you can see it's now cutting out all the parts that were previously white. I probably could have done a neater cutout there, but hopefully that'll give you the idea. You can always go back and edit that file to make it neater. So that's the basic process with decals. And I want to show you that first, partly because, again, I want to make this render a bit more interesting, but also because it gives me a chance to look at render paths. So whenever you're working with textures for 3D rendering, Revit needs to be able to find all of these different files. So the ones that I've used for the decals, but also the ones that have been used for all of these textures, for that concrete for the floor and for the timber on those shelves. So at the moment it's obviously finding them because we can see them. But if you go to another computer, it may not find those files. So if that's the case, you can go to the File menu and then choose Options. Go to the Rendering option there on the left and click the green plus button, and you'll see this field comes up where you can then browse and choose a part. So you won't see any files here. All you'll see is folders, because that's what you're trying to choose. You're just trying to choose a folder so that Revit knows where to look. And again, I'm going to go to that same folder I was just in. Here we are, material images, and yeah, rugs. Just think, you know, let's just pretend that it can't find my rugs images, and this will just force it to always look there. So often you'll have your own group of textures, and you can just keep all of those in one folder, and again, if Revit isn't finding them, just point it to that folder with that same option. And so now, of course, when I go to render, it'll definitely show all of those things. And you'll need to use that quite often when you go to render in cloud as well, which is the next thing I'm going to show you. But there we are, so that's starting to work. Low quality, but it's working. So I'll stop that one. Okay, so I might just stop that video there, and so that's basically on decals.